Deep within a dark, magical realm, our resident Chuunibyou protagonist, Sid Kagano, struts around in his edgy, pitch-black Shadow Garden gear, while blue magical energy swirls around his boots. Seriously, his main quest in life isn't to be a generic RPG hero or some final boss, but the ultimate puppet master pulling the strings from the background. He stands in his mental happy place, flanking himself with an imaginary elf girl and an army of masked followers.
Smirking under his hood, like a total dork, whose eyes flash red because he desperately wants to be the Eminence in shadow. This whole dream started in his past life as a basic school kid, where he dreamed of posing dramatically in a feathered hat with flower petals. Back in the real world, young Sid spent his nights in a dark bedroom, staring at a glowing computer screen, pretending to be an unremarkable mob character at school while secretly undergoing a brutal physical grind on the weight bench. He spent his days ignoring high school socialites, reading books, and mastering martial arts, while hiding his power level under a shadowed face. He sat hunched over his desk, preparing for his shadow-broken career, fully aware that no matter how much you bench, you still get deleted by a modern military squad in a gunfight. He even calculated that a direct nuclear strike would vaporize him instantly.
Which is a massive skill issue for a wannabe shadow deity. So what did he do? He wore a victory headband and crammed his brain with crazy theories to avoid getting nuked, desperately scribbling notes and researching bizarre mystical methods. After losing his mind over a knockoff magic book, he decided he had to unlock actual magical energy. He went on a solo budget pilgrimage wearing a goofy straw hat, meditated under freezing waterfalls, did extreme yoga tree poses, prayed on a random wooden cross, and literally smashed his bare head against tree trunks until he bled. Then, one night on a dark road, he saw flickering headlights. Convinced he'd finally found the magical source, he sprinted toward it and got himself completely pancaked by a massive oncoming delivery truck. Fast forward to his isekai reincarnation as Sid Kagano, where he retains all those ridiculous memories. Now, out on the training grounds of his family's grand estate, his overbearing, powerhouse older sister Claire is absolutely bodying him in a wooden sword duel. To maintain his masterclass mob character disguise, Sid deliberately lets her break his defenses and take him down with a magically enhanced kick. He flops onto the grass, fake crying about how she's way too strong, while Claire looks down at him like he's a pathetic disappointment who brings shame to their prestigious spell sword lineage. She's only 12, but already has the stuck-up aura of a top-tier warrior, sighing in disgust as she lectures him about their noble blood and demands he take it seriously. Sid plays the weak, submissive little brother perfectly, so Claire summons a flashy magic orb
and holds her wooden sword horizontally to continue her condescending lecture about his lack of magic, technique, and physique. She predicts he'll always be a bottom-tier apprentice, but then decides to flex by charging her blade with glowing energy. With one clean horizontal slice, she explodes a massive boulder and strikes a proud pose amidst the rubble. Sid does his best NPC impression, cheering with fake starry-eyed wonder and asking for her secret. Claire smugly sheathes her sword, says it's impossible for him anyway, and tells him to clean up the shattered rocks while she heads inside. The second she's out of sight, Sid's goofy loser act vanishes instantly. A devious grin spreads across his face, because at just 10 years old, he's actually a max-level magic prodigy. He praises his own flawless acting and starts effortlessly juggling the heavy, broken boulders in a high-speed loop. He balances the heavy stones perfectly on his fingertips and knows he can execute crazy physical feats. He resolves to keep his true fangs hidden like a proper shadow broker. He plays hacky-sack with the rocks, but realizes he still hasn't figured out how to survive a nuke. Since nukes don't exist in this fantasy world, he could
technically ignore it, but our perfectionist protagonist refuses to compromise his edgy standards. Eager for a live fire test, he sprints toward the nearby dark forest under the twilight sky, hoping to hunt down some local bandits to test his gear as night completely consumes the woods.
Over at a chaotic bandit camp hidden deep in the dark woods, a rowdy gang of bandits is throwing a victory party inside a run-down wooden building. The stubble-faced leader and his light-haired lackey are chugging alcohol and celebrating their successful raid, while a bald thug laughs about how easily they slaughtered a helpless merchant woman and her young boy earlier.
In their sick, twisted memories, we see the tragic victims slumped over a bloody cart, while these scumbags mock them. Back in the present, the bald bandit chuckles at how careless merchants are, and the leader smugly begins to recount how he threatened them. He laughs and mutters about making them show their valuables.
Suddenly, Sid crashes through the roof like a complete maniac, scaring the absolute crap out of the dark-haired thug and sending the leader reeling. Brandishing his weapon, Sid lunges into the camp, screaming a wild battle cry, leaving the bald bandit sweating in terror and the leader yelling about who this weird kid is. Our boy Sid strikes an edgy combat stance, screams a classic thug line about handing over their valuables, and gets labeled with a hilarious protagonist text box. He demands their gold, pointing his dark slime weapon
At the bald thief and ordering him to jump. The terrified bandit complies, and when Sid hears a satisfying coin-clinking sound, he happily claims the loot. The spiky-haired bandit is utterly baffled by this weirdo, but Sid just tells them to stay calm, while claiming he's just a passing, unremarkable midget. He then launches into a full-blown commercial pitch for his custom-made slime suit and slime sword,
explaining that slimes can change shape with magic, to the utter horror of the surrounding thugs. In a funny flashback, we see Sid blending caught slimes into jelly to craft an ultra-high conductivity suit and sword, complete with stylized, strong and cheap infomercial slogans. He boasts about their 99% magic conductivity and lunges forward, slashing the bald bandit's chest while offering the gear to the lady of the house. He unleashes a barrage of high-speed aura slashes, instantly slicing open the light-haired bandit and cutting down the reddish-brown thug with a brutal cross-slash. Sid laughs like a literal psychopath with jagged teeth, earning another protagonist label as he turns the entire camp into a bloody blender. Standing in the quiet, blood-soaked camp, he casually shrugs off the massacre. The battered bandit leader glares in pure hatred, and Sid realizes he only has one target left to test his nifty function number 2 on. The desperate leader screams about being a royal capital Bushin master and unleashes a heavy downward slash. The blade hits Sid's chest with a metallic clang, doing 0 damage and leaving the leader in shock. Sid smugly points to his intact slime suit, explaining that it has incredible defensive armor stats. The frustrated leader swings again, but Sid effortlessly dodges while critiquing the Bushin sword style. He flips through the air with extreme agility, leaving the leader completely unable to track his speed. When the leader asks where his sword went, Sid delivers a brutal mid-air kick that sends the boss flying. He reveals that nifty function number 2 lets him draw his slime sword from anywhere, adding a final burn by noting the leader was actually stronger than his sister. Sid stands victoriously among the wreckage, loots a heavy pouch of stolen coins, and dramatically tells the dead merchants that their stolen goods will now fund his rise as the Eminence in shadow. However, his attention is caught by a weird, cloth-covered cage. He pulls back the cover, expecting a slave, only to find a rotting, pale, corpse-like figure that lets out an eerie whistle. Realizing it's still barely breathing, Sid recognizes the symptoms of possession. He recalls how the church claims to purify these cursed people, but actually massacres them behind closed doors to keep the public happy. Suddenly, a massive, unstable magic wave crackles around the rotting body, Recognizing the immense magical potential, Sid gets a devious grin on his face and decides to steal this test subject for some wild magical experiments. Back at his secret forest base, after several days of intense magic tweaking, Sid stands in his academy uniform holding a cleaver and a hammer, admitting he was completely shocked by the results of his experiments. It turns out the gross, rotting blob of flesh was actually a gorgeous, top-tier blonde elf girl. Cured and radiant, Alpha stares at her healed skin in absolute disbelief, immediately kneeling before Sid with tears of intense gratitude and offering to devote her entire life to him. Sid casually dismisses the heavy proposal, but internally, his Chuunibyou brain starts spinning. He sits on a crate and asks if she wants to be his follower in Shadow Garden, which predictably confuses her. Realizing she has absolutely no idea what he's talking about, he knows he needs to set a concrete goal. After quickly brainstorming a wild fantasy trope to manipulate her, he declares her name is now Alpha and makes up a massive lie on the spot. He gravely announces that their grand mission is to stop the resurrection of the demon Diabolos. Alpha, sweating in confusion, asks if he means the demon from the fairy tales. Sid confirms this with a straight face, launching into a fabricated history lesson about how 3 ancient heroes defeated Diabolos. He claims the cult covered up the truth and that Diabolos cursed the heroes' descendants. He describes how this curse is passed down, calling it the curse of Diabolos, which explains her possession illness. Scratching silly drawings in the dirt with a branch, he explains that her rotting skin was actually proof of her heroic lineage. Alpha clutches her head in anger, furious that hero descendants are persecuted instead of revered. Sid points his stick at the drawings, explaining that a secret shadow organization called the Diabolos cult rewrote history to wipe them out. He adds that they are actively trying to revive the demon and designates them as their ultimate enemies. He claims this deadly cult operates entirely in the dark and erases anyone in their way. Since he employs the same sneaky tactics, he plans to stand up to them from the dark while striking a highly dramatic pose. Posing dramatically under a massive full moon as snow begins to fall, Sid declares their edgy motto, "We lurk in the shadows, and we hunt the shadows." He warns her that saving the world won't be easy and that failure means absolute destruction before offering his hand to recruit her. Completely brainwashed by his epic storytelling, Alpha is filled with righteous, vengeful fury. She realizes the massive scale of their enemy and vows that the suffering of others must stop. She stands and yells in defiance. Kneeling under the giant moon, she solemnly pledges her life to Shadow Garden to bring death to their enemies. She bows her head, wishing vengeful death upon the sinners. The intense atmosphere instantly evaporates as Alpha bashfully clutches her collar while Sid stares at her with a blank, deadpan expression. Internally, our boy is absolutely celebrating because he totally nailed the role play. He maintains his deadpan face while realizing she's fully invested, smirking at how easily she bought his improvised act. As they walk through the snowy woods, Sid happily plans to keep this hilarious roleplay going forever, reminding himself that the cult doesn't actually exist, but his eyes glow anyway as he commits to the bit, already excited to use more cheesy lines about the demon's revival before a final note teases the next installment of his ridiculous journey.
The video ends here, but the story isn't over yet. Like the video if you're ready for the next part. We open under the clear skies of the Kagano estate grounds, where Sid quietly reflects with Alpha on their lengthy 3-year journey since the glorious founding of Shadow Garden. Now that he and Alpha are 13 and his aggressively overprotective sister, Claire, has turned 15, she is legally obligated to attend the capital's magic school. But before she can leave, she corners him in her new uniform, threatening violence if he doesn't say she looks good. Sid's sister would have left,
But her plans are completely derailed on the day of her departure, because as the dramatic narrator and our panicked protagonist shout in unison, his sister was suddenly kidnapped in the second episode of this ridiculous journey. Talk about a generic fantasy hook. In her empty room, the bald patriarch of the family strokes his goatee, praising the kidnapper's stealth, and claiming the culprit must have been exceptionally skilled. The mama tilts her head with a sweet, angelic smile, asking if they were truly powerless. But when the pops tries to dodge the blame by claiming he can't be held responsible for sleeping through it, she morphs into fanged absolute rage and punches him. She launches him across the room, screaming that he shouldn't make convoluted excuses and despairing over their family's only hope, leaving him weakly whimpering on the floor. Watching his parents fight, Sid nervously wonders if his hairline is doomed. He shrugs it off, walking down the quiet hallway, musing on how magic lets women be exceptionally strong
and frequently makes them heirs. Content with his lack of presence, he slips through the lavish parlor, completely content with his unremarkable status. Then he enters his bedroom to lock his door, exhaling deeply as he lets his background character mask slide. Sensing a stealth build by his window, he calls out to his subordinate, prompting Beta to step out from the white drapes, clutching a bundle of gathered documents. Sid questions where Alpha is, and Beta reports that she is looking for Claire's tracks, before adopting a grave tone to announce that the culprit is a high-ranking officer of the Diabolos cult, specifically one of their highest-ranking commanders. Fully committing to the bit, Sid asks why they took his sister, and Beta explains that they suspect she might be a hero's descendant, pointing toward the northern region on her maps. Sid poses dramatically, mentally noting that Beta is their third member, and that Alpha keeps picking girls up like stray cats. Suddenly, Alpha appears to proudly praise their sleek new slime suits. Sid is highly entertained by how they play along with his shadow routine, endlessly elaborating on his fabricated cult backstory. When Beta starts translating ancient letters pointing to the cult, Sid decides to act cool despite knowing it doesn't exist, and hurls a folding knife directly into the desk map. He sits back and declares that his knife throw reveals where they are keeping Claire, explaining that the northern base is a fake and the real one is south. Beta blinks in surprise at the lack of markings, but suddenly gasps, her brain performing Olympic-level mental gymnastics to process the coordinates and conclude that there must be an underground hideout in the south. She looks up with tears of pure devotion, stammering in absolute awe of his instant analytical skills and how he understood their hidden meaning while looking at him with worship. Striking a sharp pose, Sid corrects her that she must refer to him as Shadow, pointing toward the horizon as he orders a midnight rescue. Beta bows in unison, leaving our protagonist internally laughing at how they follow up his random, fabricated lies with an Oscar-worthy performance. Cut to the gloomy, damp underground prison of the southern region, where the steady echo of water droplets sets a classic dungeon crawler mood. Clicking his boots, the tall, blonde cult officer Rex approaches the iron bars, mocking his captain, Claire Kaganoe, by asking how she is holding up. Kneeling in heavy chains, our feral sister instantly recognizes his punchable face as the prestigious but trash-tier Viscount Olba, who got utterly clapped in the first round of Princess Iris's tournament. She laughs in his face, ruthlessly roasting his pathetic tourney defeat and calling him the ultimate first-round loser. Rex instantly throws a lethal kick at her skull, but she ducks it like a pro, letting the force crater the stone wall behind her. Surprised by her high reflex stat, Rex admits she's got genuine mechanics instead of just throwing magic around wildly. Remaining completely unfazed by the rubble, Claire smugly boasts that her bratty brother taught her how to optimize magic when Rex questions who her sibling is, and she proudly claims her bratty brother. We get a quick training flashback of her aggressively styling on young Sid while secretly stealing his masterclass techniques. Though Sid always ended up eating grass, which is exactly why she bullies him every single day in the present.
back in the dark cell. She demands to go home, but Rex pivots to asking if she's felt unwell or suffered possession debuffs, like rotting black spots. She scoffs at his fake doctor act. Recalling how Sid cured her with weird stretching exercises a year ago and left her feeling perfectly fine, Rex realizes she's had the symptoms and is definitely compatible. And when Claire demands answers, he refuses and threatens to investigate her brother. Big mistake. Delivering a sudden, violent strike that connects directly with Rex's face, Claire breaks free from her shackles and unleashes an insane, blood-soaked anime rage aura, whispering that she will end him. Rex is horrified by her self-mutilation build, but Claire just steps forward, howling that she will slaughter his entire lineage if he touches Sid. Desperate to mute her, Rex delivers a heavy blow to her face, knocking her out. He decides to leave to harvest her blood instead. Suddenly, an armored knight shrieks that invaders are tearing up the dungeon and warns of attackers in the hall. Rex rushes out, sword drawn, only to freeze in sheer terror at the sight of his entire elite guard squad lying dead, shouting in disbelief. A massive wave of magic violently explodes the ceiling. Sweating and unable to track her speed, Rex watches Alpha step out, flanked by several masked members of Shadow Garden. They declare doom upon the Diabolos cult. With Alpha standing tall as her silver hair frames her mask and gliding past him to whisper about the demon Diabolos and the truth behind possession, Rex loses his absolute mind, screaming to know where they learned their top-tier endgame guild secrets. Alpha simply turns her back as Rex desperately rants about their leak, which shouldn't have been possible, but she immediately cuts him down with a lightning-fast slash that brings him to his knees. Smiling beneath her mask, Alpha claims they won't kill him as her nearby subordinate giggles because they need info. Cornered, Rex swallows a shady rage-enhancing pill, while Alpha watches calmly, triggering a grotesque awakening transformation that shatters the floor. While the Shadow Garden babes stand perfectly unbothered, Beta flags his escape through the wall and urges to chase, but Alpha smugly stops her, as Beta turns back in surprise, claiming that their god-tier boss, Shadow, already predicted this escape path and is waiting up ahead because Sid foresaw how this would go, which leaves Beta beyond words. Meanwhile, deep within the vaulted corridors of the massive Southern Underground facility, our Chuunibyou King Sid is posing in full Shadow cosplay, completely oblivious to the fact that he got lost and separated from his team. With his cloak billowing dramatically, he mentally notes that this bandit hideout has way too high of a production budget. Suddenly, Rex stumbles in, wheezing and totally shocked, which Sid immediately frames as a mandatory boss-level event. Rex gets into a defensive stance and swings his blade in a frantic lunge, but Shadow casually blocks his ultimate physical strike with a single index finger. While Rex is drowning in sheer horror, Sid's analytical inner monologue notes that this bandit actually has a massive mana pool, even higher than Alpha, but possesses an absolutely zero-tier swordsmanship build. To Sid, relying strictly on brute force magic is incredibly crude and, frankly, quite boring.
In his past life, he learned the hard way that spamming raw damage without spacing leads to a quick game over, which fully justified his current highly optimized survival strategy. Deciding to flex his physical gaming expertise, Shadow reaches for his waist, declaring he must step in to show him how real combat works, as he audibly sheathes his weapon. Rex is utterly baffled, screaming not to be made light of and calling him a brat as he charges. With perfect spacing, Shadow zips past his attack, delivering a non-magical punch to his solar plexus that launches the massive cult officer backward. Sid lectures him about using an opponent's momentum without magic, then zips back to deliver a devastating kick
that leaves Rex completely winded. Shadow evades another desperate lunge with mesmerizing grace. Facing an absolute wall of skill, Rex has a classic villain flashback to his childhood training, remembering how utterly helpless he felt against his former master, realizing this boy's power gap is just as vast. Trembling and gasping in agony, Rex begs to know where he came from as he frantically asks about his opponent's origins and what Shadow Garden actually is. Shadow delivers the ultimate Chuunibyou line. We lurk in the shadows, and we hunt the shadows, stating that is their sole purpose. Rex desperately snarls that opposing them is hopeless and that they stand no chance, since the darkness runs far deeper than they know. Shadow countersmirks, claiming they will simply burrow ever deeper. Insulted, Rex screams that this isn't a game and calls him a little shit, greedily popping a handful of illegal magic pills and clutching his chest as they react, to amass immense magical power to show off his ultimate strength and complete his awakening giant form. The massive giant slams his blade, breaking the tiles, prompting Shadow to leap backward. Rex swings wide, laughing maniacally and roaring that it is useless, and screaming in triumph, boasting about his raw strength and power. He shrieks that Shadow is slow, flimsy, and brittle, as Shadow effortlessly dodges, calmly preparing his final attack, declaring that playtime is over. Shadow unleashes a massive, ink-like wave of black slime magic that completely engulfs Rex. Rex is overwhelmed by the sheer chasm of magic as the impact launches him backward, his mind drifting into a peaceful white void where he remembers his past defeats and realizes this kid is on a whole different level, whispering a quiet goodbye to Melia. Later, our boy Sid sits comfortably at his breakfast table in the morning sun as he reflects on his status, reflecting on how their bandit hunting rescue operation ended. His sister Claire's hands healed instantly, allowing her to head to the capital, though she annoyed him by poking his cheek beforehand. Sid mentally praises the bandit boss for playing his role so well, secretly thrilled he got to use his burrow ever deeper line. He notes that Alpha and the rest keep adding absurd, world-scale lore about a global conspiracy where they capture compatible targets to their imaginary cult, but he completely ignores their elaborate backstory. When they announced they were leaving to travel the world, he assumed they were just letting him down easy and retiring from the game. He feels a bit sentimental sitting on his roof, watching the sunset cast long shadows, knowing he's just a wannabe acting tough, but looking forward to joining the Capital School in 2 years to attend classes at the Capital. And with the narrator teasing that his road is long, Sid raises his fist to the setting sun, swearing to grow strong and keep working to become the true Eminence in Shadow under the setting sun. We kick things off in a dimly lit, abstract mental space where our Chuunibyou in chief is busy role-playing on an imaginary throne as he lays down his absolute golden rule. An elite shadow mastermind must always pass as a flawless, bottom-tier background NPC. In his mental visual, a massive venomous serpent rears its head, representing the ultimate truth that the legendary Shadow Eminence and a generic mob character are literally two sides of the same coin. He compares high-tier powerhouses to a basic frog sitting uselessly on a rock, reminding us that even in his past life, he wore a standard gym jersey and meticulously optimized his physical movement just to master the art of being totally unnoticeable. Cut to the massive gates of the Midgar Royal Spellsword Academy, where Sid arrives resolved to continue his flawless run as a complete ghost. Inside the high-windowed classroom, he flaunts his academic report card, celebrating a solid 2 months of maintaining perfectly subpar average grades to completely blend in with the local crowd. But of course, his peaceful grind is instantly griefed when his C-tier NPC buddy, a smug barony son named Hyoro, calls out to him and asks how he did on the practical, while his round-faced sidekick Jaga boasts about their B ranks. Sid calmly shows off his garbage C rank, claiming low mana,
only for Hyoro to lean in with a sneaky grin to remind him of their pre-test wager, specifically the rule that the lowest scoring loser has to face a devastating penalty. Meanwhile, out in the corridor, a random rich boy with imaginary roses gets brutally rejected by the Academy's top-tier idol, Princess Alexia Midgar, who looks like she would rather watch paint dry. The local spectating students watch from behind a doorway, gossiping about her dumping a high-status duke's son in record time, prompting Hyoro to explain that she's the school's untouchable royalty.
Jaga notes her future is probably just a cold political marriage anyway, but Hyoro smugly insists she'd fold if you're stubborn enough, which is when Sid finally chimes in with an annoyed expression and begs to skip this cringe penalty game. Hyoro violently denies the request,
yelling that losing the bet means Sid has to confess to a girl. Sid puts on an award-worthy performance of pure, trembling embarrassment, while Hyoro cackles in his face, openly admitting he just wants to watch a pathetic chump get socially obliterated. Sid sighs at his friend's trash behavior,
as Jaga happily calculates a 100% fail rate, and Hyoro shoves him toward his doom.
Sid dramatically shakes his fists,
but the second they look away, his face twists into a manic, unhinged grin, because this is literally his dream scenario. Getting publicly rejected by the school's idol is the ultimate, gold standard mob achievement. A brief flashback reveals him pulling an all-nighter in his dark dorm, wearing a victory headband to research the perfect confession strategies to maximize his mob rating before launching his mobbist mobfession. He runs at Princess Alexia, slurring her name, while carefully executing his stuttering vibrato.
A precise 60-degree hunch, trembling knees, and a wandering gaze. Stopping at a mathematically perfect distance of 182 centimeters, he drops into a rigid, flawless 90-degree bow to pop the question, mentally high-fiving himself for delivering a performance of pure artistic mediocrity and self-described art. Alexia stands frozen in absolute silence. But instead of the expected soul-crushing rejection, she grabs his hands with an ethereal, angelic smile and happily accepts the proposal. Sid's brain completely blue screens, and as he stutters in absolute horror while she casually confirms the relationship, a silent, gargantuan scream of existential dread echoes through the school, because his perfect mob build just got hijacked by a forced rom-com protagonist route. We cut to the bustling academy cafeteria, where Sid sits over his meal staring with a severe frown of pure confusion at his plate. Jaga sits next to him, and Hyoro scowls, agreeing that this entire situation is incredibly suspicious. Sid rants to them about the math not adding up. How does a girl reject a high-tier duke's son, but instantly accept a certified nobody? Hyoro lazily tells him to just shut up and enjoy the win, before screwing up his face to mockingly insist that the princess is probably just using a plain loser as a joke to cleanse her palate from handsome guys like him. Sid stares back with absolute deadpan energy, while the surrounding NPC classmates huddle nearby, whispering absolute murder and throwing lethal daggers with their eyes. This immediate aggro sends a jolt of panic through Sid's nervous system as he realizes standing out like this will completely ruin his hidden mastermind playthrough. Dripping cold sweat, he tries to salvage his cover by casually claiming he's going to dump her immediately because she's way out of his league. The boys gasp in shock, and Sid double downs on his escape plan while picking up some food and swearing them to absolute secrecy about the penalty game. Hyoro and Jaga happily agree, only for a sweet, terrifying voice to chime in right behind them. The boys jump out of their skin as Princess Alexia and her dark-haired maid appear, with the princess casually asking to join their table.
Hyoro immediately panics and rolls out the red carpet with stuttering obsequiousness, while Sid remains completely detached, casually snatching a piece of fish from the serving tray while Jaga watches in awe. The maid serves their luxury plates, and Sid's eyes flare with a devious, galaxy-brain strategy to force a breakup through terrible table manners. He loudly comments on how massive her course is, and when she complains she can never finish it, Sid launches his social suicide attack by shamelessly stealing a huge chunk of fish right off her plate, to Jaga's absolute admiration. He waves a drumstick around, stuffs his face like a starved raccoon, and aggressively crumbles his food, gloating internally that no princess would ever tolerate such a repulsive, uncouth gremlin. For a brief second, Alexia smirks with quiet amusement, but then she hits him with an angelic, loving smile and tells him to eat his fill, even pushing a plate of bread his way. Sid freezes with bread dangling out of his mouth in sheer defeat, while Jaga frantically apologizes for his lack of manners, and Hyoro desperately sucks up to her. Sid can only stare at his traitorous friends, secretly admiring how effortlessly they exude pure background character energy. The princess then drops a bomb. She mentions they both signed up for the Royal Bushin-style practical elective this afternoon and invites him to train, casually adding that she pulled strings to get him into the expert class by royal decree. While his friends stand in absolute dumbfounded shock, we transition to the massive training hall, where high-tier students are running combat drills in their sleek black gear. Various squads are clashing with wooden swords, and Sid observes the high-quality facilities, noting how the school segregates the elite black uniform students from the white uniform beginners. The handsome instructor, Zenon, claps to gather the class and happily introduces Sid as their new transfer student. A random female student immediately objects to a white-clad scrub joining the lobby, but Zenon smoothly pacifies her by revealing it's a direct recommendation from the princess, causing the girl to instantly blush and back down. Sid sweat drops at the sheer power of Alexia's brand, just as the princess herself approaches in her sleek training gear and twin tails. She assumes a combat stance, but Sid immediately tries to throw the match and lazily raises his wooden sword. Alexia challenges him to a bout, and their wooden swords clash with a loud ring. Sid easily parries her attacks, silently analyzing her rock-solid fundamentals and comparing her hard-working style to her overpowered genius sister, Iris. Alexia praises his swordsmanship and admits it is not bad, but her frustration suddenly boils over as she unleashes a heavy strike, shouting that she doesn't like his style. She ends up slightly off balance and quickly apologizes for using too much power, but Sid lazily shrugs it off. Suddenly, Zenon interrupts to scold Alexia, and she quickly turns around as the instructor hands Sid a fresh practice sword. Sid takes it with a basic nod, and Zenon praises his impressive freshman moves before launching into a lecture about how the Royal Bushin style revolutionized the meta and why it's accepted by the younger generation. Sid plays the humble fanboy, complimenting Zenon's fame, which prompts the instructor to laugh and emit literal, sparkling husband material energy. Annoyed by this smooth display, Alexia aggressively steps between them, and as she grips her sword document, she suddenly yanks Sid into a crushing, highly suggestive embrace. This leaves Sid standing absolutely rigid, his soul escaping his body in a frozen, deadpan face of absolute existential despair. The awkwardness continues out in the Grand Academy hallway, where Zenon watches them retreat and warns Alexia that she can't keep running away forever. The princess cold shoulders him, claiming she's just a child who doesn't understand adult politics, and immediately grabs Sid's arm to drag him away as their footsteps echo. Zenon's dark silhouette stands motionless, watching their exit, while Sid glances over with an incredibly bored expression. Looking out at the majestic stone courtyard, Sid finally pieces the puzzle together and confronts her. He points out that Zenon is clearly her fiancé candidate, and that Sid is just being used as a human shield. Alexia casually shrugs it off. but Sid dramatically clutches his chest, whining about how she toyed with his delicate heart just to pick a harmless target. She gives him a flat, deadpan look as she walks on, explaining that Zenon has been forcing the marriage issue lately. Sid waves his hand dismissively and tells her to keep him out of her personal drama. But Alexia suddenly corners him with a smug smirk and addresses him as Mr. Penalty Game Loser. Sid's heart skips a beat as his brain tries to reboot, attempting to play dumb and sweating profusely. She reveals that his round-faced buddy Yaga, or Pot as she calls him, instantly spilled all the beans the second she said hello, prompting Sid's soul to burn with pure rage. Sid vows to turn his traitorous friend into actual mashed potatoes. Alexia deadpans that he's mixing his inner thoughts with his spoken lines before instantly flipping the switch to fake tears and threatening him with execution for making a princess cry. Realizing this girl is a master-tier manipulative actress, Sid accepts defeat, but reminds her that a mere baron's son won't keep a high-tier fiancé away. She asks what he dislikes about Zenon, and Sid points out the instructor's suspiciously perfect, glittering smile.
Standing tall, Alexia tosses a handful of silver coins into the air, declaring that perfect people don't exist, and that she actually prefers predictable scum like Sid. She mockingly steps near the glittering loot, telling him to pick it up. Sid attempts to hold on to his dignity, asking if she thinks he can be bought. But the second she says you do, he drops straight to his knees to eagerly scoop up the cash. Alexia smirks down at her newly acquired subordinate, telling him he's a good boy, but has to yell to get his attention when he ignores her for the money. She points a pen at his collar, firmly declaring that they are keeping up the fake couple act until Zenon gives up. She smirks down, calling him her pooch, while Sid mutters that he won't tolerate such humiliation, only for her to instantly toss another silver coin. Sid moves in a blinding flash of pure greed to fetch the coin, completely accepting his new, highly paid reality as the twisted princess's personal dog. We kick things off in the Grand Training Hall, where Sid has spent 2 agonizing weeks playing the part of a fake boyfriend. Sure, her polite public act makes him want to vomit, but when they're alone, she reveals her actual, delightfully twisted self. Instead of falling for her cute, blushing smile, our boy Sid maintains a flawless, stone-cold, unimpressed gaze, fully immune to her charms because he spent his past life failing to beat high-difficulty RPGs after falling for deceptive boss waifus, making his current strategy to keep his feelings at a solid 0. She immediately points out the terrible dog sketch on his robe, laughing and calling him her personal pooch, before demanding he fetch her some water. Sid tries to act tough and refuses to be her servant, but the split-second sound of a silver coin hits his ears, and his body autopaths at supersonic speeds to deliver a freshly poured glass. She praises her highly convenient, money-driven dog, leaving Sid to curse his own god-tier Pavlovian cash reflexes. During their wooden sword spar, the princess starts venting about how Instructor Zenon acts like a well-adjusted adult. She complains that he doesn't even bother trying to sabotage her, which deeply pisses her off because his effortless skill makes her feel utterly inadequate. Sid, playing the ultimate background character, casually shrugs off his prowess and easily parries her attack, while asking if they aren't basically on the same level anyway. Alexia admits she's worked hard and is relatively strong, but her mood immediately plummets as she compares herself to her cheat code sister, whispering that she has 0 talent and that everyone calls her swordplay mediocre. She flashes back to a soul-crushing memory where she felt microscopic standing in her sister's shadow, especially when her golden child sister patronizingly claimed she liked her sword style. That single compliment made her despise her own style forever. But then, Sid gets surprisingly real, telling her he only hates her style because it's just as gloriously basic as his own, throwing in a casual grunt. He breaks the fourth wall of NPC behavior by admitting he's an awful person who wouldn't care if 1 million people died, and that if she got kidnapped, he'd literally just laugh.
But he argues everyone has their own weird, highly optimized priorities in life, even if others think they're completely trivial. So if their swordplay is truly identical, then he genuinely likes her style. Alexia flushes hard, suspicious of his sudden main character energy. But Sid immediately downgrades back to lazy NPC mode, saying he just hates when things he likes get trashed. This completely shatters her defense, and she abruptly calls off the session to walk home alone. Cut to the school cafeteria, where the Academy's premier NPC trio is finally reunited. Sid's bald classmate is hyped to finally eat together again, while his wavy-haired friend is seething with raw, maidenless jealousy over Sid's daily princess dates. Sid just glares at them, calling them straight-up traitors. The bald kid frantically rubs his dome, arguing he already shaved his head as an apology, though Sid bluntly points out he was always bald. The blonde classmate immediately asks how far they've gotten physically, but Sid shuts it down with a tired shrug. Suddenly, a shadow falls over their table as the handsome, final boss-looking instructor Xenon looms over them, prompting Sid to snap back into his polite student routine. Xenon gravely asks to speak with him in private, telling him to stay calm. Sid acts confused as Xenon drops a massive lore bomb. Alexia didn't make it home yesterday. The blonde classmate lets out a hilarious, high-pitched scream, while Xenon explains they found her shoe and signs of a struggle, meaning she's been kidnapped. Externally, Sid is sweating bullets in classic horror, but internally, his dark, petty brain is cheering. That is, until Xenon adds that Sid is their only suspect, summoning a squad of heavily armored royal guards. Before he can even process the setup, a light-haired knight aggressively grabs him, dragging him off to the interrogation room. Meanwhile, over at the imposing Knights Order headquarters, we find two figures looking out of the massive glass windows as Princess Iris Midgar regally notes she has a firm grasp on the situation. She narrows her eyes, declaring that Sid looks incredibly suspicious, and asks Marquis Xenon for his take. Xenon, acting perfectly composed, agrees that most people suspect the kid, but dismisses Sid's abilities, calling them the absolute embodiment of mediocrity. He pictures the poor mob kid getting harmlessly bullied in an interrogation cell, concluding he simply lacks the stats to pull off a royal kidnapping. Iris wonders if Sid had accomplices, but Xenon dismisses this, predicting the boy won't talk under pressure anyway. Right on cue, the heavy doors slam open as Sid's terrifyingly overprotective older sister, Claire, bursts into the room. She completely cuts off Iris's train of thought about keeping tabs on him, desperately begging the princess to release her brother. Stunned by this sudden breach of security, Iris gives a cold, authoritative glare, demanding to know who this girl is. Xenon immediately panics, scolding Claire for her utter lack of manners in front of royalty. Claire ignores him entirely, fiercely declaring her name and her absolute devotion to her little brother. Xenon quickly backtracks to explain she's actually an elite trial member of the Order, prompting Iris to generously let the girl speak. Claire wastes no time, passionately arguing that her brother is innocent and has been brutally tortured for 5 days straight. Iris tries to save face by telling her not to use the word torture, coolly explaining that they are just conducting a routine, highly thorough investigation. Claire's anxiety spikes as she points out that Sid faces execution if the true culprit isn't found. She has a total anime brain moment, picturing Sid as a delicate, sparkling cinnamon roll who wouldn't hurt a fly, before escalating to full-blown treason by threatening to murder the princess if her precious brother dies. Xenon physically grabs her shoulder to shut her up before they get them both executed. Watching this desperate display, Iris is deeply moved by the sisters' raw, family-first energy, shedding a single dramatic tear as she whispers a silent prayer for Alexia's safety. After his release, Sid retreats to his secret hideout, where Alpha arrives with a fresh paper bag, noting how dire things have gotten. Sid,
sporting some nasty cuts and bandages, immediately rants about how those corrupt knights absolutely obliterated his health bar despite his polite cooperation. Alpha asks why he didn't just break aggro and escape, to which Sid explains he wanted to avoid drawing even more attention, remembering how his past gaming failures in survival simulators always stemmed from drawing early game aggro. She assumes he must have some brilliant galaxy brain reason for keeping his cover intact, though Sid internally deadpans that he absolutely doesn't. Sensing the tragic burden he must be carrying, Alpha insists he replenish his stamina and offers him a plate of thick-cut tuna sandwiches. Sid eagerly scarfs them down,
while Alpha reports that she's been doing some digging of her own and warns him that the corrupt Knights Order is planning to frame him. She explains that high-ranking knights are actually under the influence of the Diabolus cult, and Sid just rolls with it, treating her intense conspiracy as a fun, low-level game mechanic. She continues, theorizing that they want the princess's royal blood to resurrect Diabolus, which leads Sid to logically deduce that Alexia must still be alive. Alpha gasps in pure admiration of his instant analysis before heading out to coordinate their forces, noting that Delta is also nearby. Sid instantly pictures their feral, suicide-charging beastkin DPS, and though Alpha smiles and confirms Delta is dying to see him, he can only murmur her name in mild horror. But as he finishes the food, he realizes he has a major crisis on his hands. When Alpha gives him a stern look, pointing out he just ate her portion of the sandwiches too. Still, she confidently outlines tomorrow's raid, and playfully demands a high-end dinner once this whole quest is cleared. Once she leaves, Sid steps onto his balcony to admire her top-tier ad-libbing skills, before heading back inside and unlatching his heavy loot trunk. He admires his collection of high-end wine, expensive glassware, and fancy cigars, then gazes at his masterfully displayed stolen painting, soaking in the sweet tranquility of his aesthetic. He fondly recalls his late-night bandit hunting grinds, and how he practically begged for every single dropped coin like a true loot goblin, realizing all that exhausting fundraising was purely to set up this ultimate high-class main character flex. At dawn the next day, Beta rushes in with full energy to report that preparations are complete, only to stop and look around the empty, quiet room in confusion. She finds Sid sitting majestically in his high-backed chair, swirling a glass of wine in the dim light like an absolute final boss. Beta is instantly paralyzed with pure awe, gazing at his 90,000 zenny vintage wine, his luxury jewel-adorned lamp, and his priceless, legendary masterpiece painting. She is overwhelmed with deep sympathy, imagining the tragic, world-saving burden he must carry, even though Sid's thoughts confirm he carries absolutely zero burden. Refocusing on the mission, Beta drops to her knees to brief him on their citywide raid on the cult's hideouts, explaining that Delta's chaotic ambush will serve as their signal. She then shows him a mysterious threat letter she found, anxiously asking her lord what it means. Calmly swirls his wine, explaining it's just a weak attempt by his kidnapper framers, muttering a silent apology to Delta for stealing her spotlight. He gives a confident smirk, declaring that this grand prelude is entirely his to perform. Sometime later, Sid strolls down the dark forest path behind the academy and spots Alexia's discarded shoe on the ground. Suddenly, a corrupt, dark-haired knight steps out of the shadows, arrogantly pointing at the evidence, while his light-haired buddy pretends to sense magical residue to frame Sid as the kidnapper. Sid plays the bewildered, innocent student, but the dark-haired knight aggressively declares him under arrest, smugly mocking him for not confessing during his torture, and looking down on him like absolute trash. But in a split second, the atmosphere turns freezing cold, and the arrogant knight is paralyzed in pure terror as an invisible, high-tier strike slices clean through his heavy plate armor.
He screams in agonizing pain as his leg is completely severed, leaving his partner frozen in utter shock. The surviving light-haired knight shrieks and scrambles backward in the dirt, splattered in blood, as he looks up at the terrifying, hooded god of death. The bleeding knight weakly attempts to threaten him, warning him that he'll be a dead man by dawn. Meanwhile, Beta is hiding in the bushes, watching the carnage with absolute fascination as she frantically scribbles into her journal, totally obsessed with how cool he is. Sid raises his glowing slime blade, chillingly stating that there's nothing to fear, his eyes flashing with zero mercy beneath his hood, as he promises that by dawn, his swift strike will finish them, ensuring that all will be over. As a massive explosion echoes in the distance, Sid notes that Delta has officially started her rampage, then turns to his loyal subordinate, telling Beta it's time to move. Beta immediately salutes with a blushing, starry-eyed smile, leaving our ultimate mastermind to smirk into the night, whispering that the grand nocturne has finally begun as he prepares to dance across the battlefield. Deep inside the damp, labyrinthine tunnels of the stone corridor, our favorite chaotic beastkin dog girl Delta is currently speedrunning a dungeon raid with absolutely zero chill. The local guard mobs are having a total breakdown. One guy with a distinctive eye patch screams, "Stop! What did we ever do to you?" while his heavily armored buddy cowers in pure terror, yelling, "Eek! What the hell are you?" A random brown-haired soldier tries to reach out, begging, "Help me!" But Delta is locked in her savage, combat-ready stance. The narrator even pops in to remind us that her crazed eyes and fiendish grin look like a literal nightmare amidst the darkness, right before she swings her ridiculously oversized black sword like a baseball bat, slicing through the guards and sending them crashing into the masonry. Meanwhile, outside, a massive, bright explosion tears through the city skyline. Alpha is perched atop a clock tower, like an edgy, self-serious Batman clone, complaining that Delta has absolutely zero respect for property damage limits. But she puts on her black mask anyway, muttering that it's time to make her move. Back inside a silent, abandoned prison cell, the dust of the battle is settling. Our captive princess, Alexia Midgar, finally wakes up on a cold stone slab, groaning, "Where am I?" Instead of having a typical fantasy princess panic attack, she instantly boots up her internal tactical analysis and notes that her wrists are bound by magic sealing shackles. She quickly adopts a cynical, "not this crap again" attitude, realizing she's been generic kidnapped, but her thoughts quickly drift back to school, wondering if her favorite submissive pooch, Sid, is doing okay. Suddenly, chains rattle in the dark corner of the cell, and she calls out, hoping it's her pet dog boy. Spoiler alert, it's not. It's a massive, pale, skull-faced mutant named Amelia, chained up like a final boss prototype. Alexia recoils in pure horror, gasping, "A monster?" Right on cue, a wildly unhinged mad scientist in a lab coat bursts through the door, clutching his head and screaming that they've been sniffed out. This guy is sweating bullets and grinding his teeth, sobbing about how he just needed more royal blood for his research. Alexia tries to make polite conversation, but the scientist completely ignores her to prep a giant glowing syringe. He rambles about using her blood to summon demon kind, causing Alexia to furrow her brow. The scientist goes completely hysterical, screaming about how his incompetent coworkers ruined his research. He even violently kicks the chained-up Milia while shouting about what a loser Olba was. Alexia tells him to cut it out, but the guy suddenly hears footsteps outside and goes into a full-blown panic attack. Alexia smugly assumes the royal knights have arrived to save her, but the scientist shrieks that the invaders aren't knights and will slaughter everyone. Realizing he's out of options, the desperate madman decides to force a Phase 2 boss fight by injecting his prototype serum straight into Amelia's neck. He screams, "Give them!"
and cackles about unleashing Diabolos. Malia immediately undergoes a grotesque transformation, breaking her iron chains with ease. The doctor is briefly ecstatic, but his triumph is cut short. Malia swats him with a massive claw, leaving nothing but a wet splat of blood on the wall.
Alexia, now covered in pizza sauce residue, deadpans about her current escape odds. The monster then literally smashes through the stone wall, causing a cave-in that sends Alexia crashing to the floor. She coughs through the dust, realizing the beast has escaped. She shakes her head, stepping over the ruined cell. Her eyes fall upon the bodies of the fallen prison guards. But before she can grab a weapon, a familiar voice echoes through the corridor. She looks up from a dead guard's sword to see her smug academy instructor, Xenon, standing there in a fancy cape, offering to rescue her. Relieved, she gasps, "Instructor Xenon!" Meanwhile, transitioning over to the rainy city streets, absolute chaos is breaking out as civilian NPCs run around in terror. First Princess Iris Midgar is sprinting through the cobblestone alleys with her sword drawn, trying to figure out why multiple monster raids are spawning all over the city. She questions what on earth is going on as she dashes through the rain.
She finds her night squads engaged in a desperate raid against the mutated Melia. Her squad of knights tries to hold their ground with spears and daggers, but they are completely outmatched by the towering beast. A terrified young recruit screams, "Commander, what is that monster?" while the bearded veteran commander desperately tries to keep his squad from wiping. When the young soldier recklessly charges forward, the beast whimpers a tragic, low-pitched "help," causing the recruit to freeze in terror. Luckily, Iris executes a perfect hero entrance, leaping through the air to land a heavy horizontal slash on the boss. The young soldier is instantly starstruck, gasping, "Lady Iris!" But Iris tells him to save his praise. She turns back to the fallen beast, demanding a status report. He explains they've already lost 8 squad members to this elite mob. Suddenly, the boss recovers and lunges, prompting the soldier to scream. Iris reacts with lightning reflexes, deflecting the claw. But wait, the boss has passive health regeneration, instantly healing its sliced flesh. The squad goes into full panic mode. Refusing to back down, Iris steps forward to tank the threat, launching a massive downward strike while shouting, "Let's see you try regenerating after this!" She lands the hit cleanly, but the boss's HP bar immediately ticks back to full. Annoyed, Iris grumbles, "It's still regenerating?" and decides to channel her maximum mana into her sword for a final strike. But just as she's about to unleash her ultimate move, a wild alpha sweeps in with massive main character energy, effortlessly parrying Iris's sword and sending it flying onto the cobblestones. Alpha casually tells her she's just making the monster suffer and asks, "Can't you see?" Iris demands to know who she is. The masked elf proudly states, "Alpha." When Iris tries to flex the authority of the Night Order, Alpha basically calls her an ignorant fool who isn't even worthy of being an opponent. She tells the princess to stay in the audience seats like a good little extra. Alpha then gently approaches the weeping mutant, murmuring, "You have cried enough." She prepares a merciful, high-damage final blow as Iris and her squad watch in stunned silence. The quiet presence of this new shadow faction dominates the wet night. A solemn narration echoes through the rain, while Alpha softly prays that she will find peace in the afterlife. The recruit shivers in the aftermath, calling out to Iris. Iris stands there, staring into the empty, wet street, realizing that her sister Alexia is somehow at the center of this crazy shadow war. She clutches her sword, silently praying that her sister is safe. Back inside the ruined, dimly lit stone hall of the castle, Xenon is trying to play the chivalrous savior archetype, offering Alexia a smooth ride home in a carriage. It's just like back in my old MMO grinding days in the real world, where I constantly wiped on escort quests because I blindly trusted late-spawning NPCs.
A seasoned player knows that a convenient savior is always a trap. Relying on her optimized survival instincts, Alexia narrows her eyes, asking him how exactly he pinpointed her location so fast.
Xenon tries to play it off by saying he just sensed her magic, but Alexia instantly points out the giant plot hole in his script. Her magic was sealed by the shackles until literally 2 minutes ago. She steps forward and aggressively calls out his lies, pointing her sword at him and accusing him of knowing her location because he was the mastermind behind the kidnapping all along. Realizing his dialogue options have failed, Xenon completely drops the polite instructor facade, brings a hand to his face, and lets out a hilariously edgy villain laugh. He proudly boasts that the facility is indeed his, and that he funded the crazy mad scientist's research, spreading his arms as a massive wave of dark, oppressive magic erupts around him like a classic mid-game boss transition. Down in the grim, dimly lit underground stone corridor, Alexia Midgar plants her feet firmly and points her blade at Xenon, accusing him of being the mastermind behind her kidnapping. Instead of denying it like a normal human, the generic, corrupt instructor tilts his head back with a classic edgy villain grin, admitting she is just a vital ingredient for his shady experiment. This gets a furious glare from the determined princess,
who mockingly points out that the mad scientist he funded just got pulverized by some rampaging monster. But Xenon is a total tryhard. Before Alexia can even blink, he unleashes a lightning-fast slash that tears open her thigh, sending blood flying as she flinches in agony. He literally screams that it doesn't matter, as long as her blood is safe, while staring at his freshly stained blade. Clutching her bleeding leg, the annoyed princess grimaces and asks if he's researching frickin' vampires. But Xenon ignores her sassy retort and tells her to shut up and follow him, his face contorting into a power-hungry mess as he brags that this project will earn him the 12th seat of the Knights of the Round. Alexia is left completely confused by this generic lore drop, which triggers a cliché mental slideshow of 12 ominous cloaked figures who rule the shadows with wealth and power. He returns to the present, staring at his gloved hand like a classic mid-game boss, and claiming her blood is the final key to his promotion. Then, with a mocked sigh, he admits he would have much preferred her sister, Princess Iris, a low blow that hits Alexia's deepest insecurities. Losing her cool, she lunges forward with a furious scream to slash him, but Xenon matrix dodges the strike, mocking her for dropping her proper princess facade. She recovers instantly, shouting that she could ask him the same thing, as their swords clash in a massive shower of sparks. Xenon effortlessly parries her, mocking her shoddy sword, but Alexia pants heavily and declares that she knows she can't beat a genius in a straight fight. She drops her voice to a focused tone, explaining that she has been training for a reason, visualizing her legendary sister Iris as she unleashes a flawless diagonal slash. She leaps high to bring down a heavy strike, forcing Xenon to block with one hand. The sudden shock of her mimicking Iris's technique completely wipes the smug grin off his face, and Alexia lands gracefully, promising to execute him herself. Xenon stands completely still to analyze her stance, slowly raises his gloved hand, and terrifyingly licks his finger as he decides to finally take her seriously. Alexia gasps as his magical aura spikes, and Xenon boasts about showing off his true, non-instructor swordplay. He roars about how a Knight of the Round fights, gathering jagged black magical energy around his sword. He brings it down with crushing force, making Alexia scream as she barely blocks it. The overwhelming shockwave shatters the floor, forcing her to her knees before her sword completely shatters into useless metal shards. Xenon walks away, looking back to toss out one final emotional damage line about how she'll never be like her sister, and that talentless effort is just a cheap imitation. With a cold, merciless glare, He reaches out his hand to claim his hostage princess once and for all. Just when things look totally hopeless, the scene shifts deeper into the cold, ruined corridor as a sharp, menacing silhouette stretches across the stone floor. Xenon whips his head around in surprise, still gripping his captive princess. His brow furrows as he tries to process this uninvited intruder. Standing at the far end of the hall is our boy Sid, oozing absolute main character energy in his shadow persona. Xenon aggressively yells to ask who is there and demands to know how he got in. But Sid is fully locked into his Chuunibyou roleplay. His glowing eyes pierce through the dark hood as he sweeps his massive coat and delivers his legendary line. I am Shadow. I lurk in the shadows and hunt the shadows. A heavy, suffocating silence fills the room, prompting Xenon to narrow his eyes before drawing his blade and mocking Shadow as a stray dog biting at the cult. Xenon lets out a low, mocking laugh, calling the bases Shadow destroyed worthless, and proudly introduces himself as the future 12th Knight of the round. He grins like a lunatic and lunges forward to claim his easy promotion, leaving our angry princess sweating at his speed. Sid is completely unbothered, calmly muttering. So, Xenon confidently swings, expecting a hit, but Sid casually teleports behind him like a literal lag switcher, asking where the main cult forces are. Xenon's smug face turns to absolute sweat, and he desperately spins around to slash, only for Shadow to block it effortlessly, leaving Alexia's jaw on the floor. The two lock blades, Xenon straining like crazy, while Shadow effortlessly parries every frantic attack. Xenon growls in frustration, swinging wildly again, only to hit Shadow's perfect defense. Leaping over him, Shadow taunts him for having a dull sword, leaving Xenon choking on his own rage, before screaming, "Don't fuck with me!" in a wild frenzy. Watching this, Alexia has a sudden flashback to her training days and realizes Shadow's style is the exact ideal she always envisioned. She thinks back to her childhood and recalls her long-forgotten ambition. She realizes that this isn't some god-tier talent, but rather a swordplay of absolute mediocrity, forged by endless effort. The perfect style for those who are unblessed. This realization explains why her sister Iris actually loved her swordsmanship, bringing tears of absolute clarity to her eyes. Back in reality, Xenon gets smacked to the floor, panting and asking who the hell Shadow is and why he hides such insane power. Shadow just recites his edgelord script about Shadow Garden. Xenon pulls himself up, gets into stance, and pulls out a small vial. He swallows the pills to gain a massive stat boost, proclaims himself the third Awakener, and lets out a manic laugh to show off his ultimate power. Shadow is entirely unbothered. As Xenon starts choking on his own power spike, Shadow steps forward to call him pathetic. Xenon recoils, and Shadow raises his slime sword, preparing to strike. As he channels an absurd amount of compressed magic into his blade, Xenon is shaking in absolute terror as his magic fails, while Alexia is completely mesmerized by the pretty violet glow. Shadow draws back his arm for a massive strike. Xenon pathetically screams for him to stop, but Sid calmly tells him to witness true, ultimate power. With a quiet behold, Sid unleashes his ultimate I am atomic move. Now, to understand Sid's absolute cheat code expertise, we cut back to his past life, where a crazy boy wanted to survive a nuclear bomb. He faced a simple riddle of how not to get evaporated and trained like a madman to break his human limits until he realized the only logical solution was to literally become the nuke. Back in the present, the insane atomic blast leaves a massive, smoking crater where the facility once stood, divine energy still crackling in the air. Iris Midgard desperately runs down the edge of the crater, screaming for her sister, only to find Alexia sitting dazed but perfectly fine in the center of the blast zone. Under the quiet, starry night sky, Alexia cries out to Iris, who throws her arms around her in a massive hug. Alexia smiles and assures her sister she's safe, all while looking out at the massive wasteland left by her mysterious savior. The story jumps forward to a clear, sunny day outside the grand, historic Royal Midgar Academy. Alexia stands smugly on the terrace, hands on her hips, telling Sid he's officially off the suspect list. She paces around, talking about the mysteries surrounding the incident, while Sid stands there looking like a completely deadpan NPC. She proudly notes that her sister Iris is forming a special task force she plans to join, before resting her hand on her sword and admitting she owes him a thank you for liking her swordsmanship. Clasping her sword, she smiles genuinely and says she finally likes her own style, before quickly putting her tsundere mask back on to clarify he didn't actually help with that. Sid just rolls his eyes and mutters a dry, "Great phrasing." Alexia blushes, and seeing him walk away, she notes they don't have to fake being lovers anymore. But then she gets incredibly bashful and suggests they could actually keep dating for real, hoping he wouldn't mind. With zero hesitation and absolute speedrun efficiency, Sid turns around and drops a brutal hell no. Later that night on the rooftop, Sid is completely nonchalant as he complains about being a busy guy who's sick of being ordered around by a wicked princess. Alexia pulls out her sword with a terrifying pitch-black smile and asks if that's so. Sid dramatically claims he'd rather die, prompting Alexia to swing her blade in a murderous rage to arrange exactly that. And just like that, the camera pans up to the starry sky, leaving behind a massive pool of blood and a brand new school legend about a corpseless murder. Inside a refined, wood-paneled office at the prestigious Midgar Spell Sword Academy, the science faculty is getting drafted into royal business. Princess Iris Midgar stands tall to address the academics under the watchful eyes of an armed guard. She enlists their help to learn something new, turning her gaze to the quiet prodigy, Sherry Barnett. Sherry studies the intricate etchings on a strange, heavy relic, explaining that it's highly encrypted with ancient runes. Iris's expression turns grave as she reveals it was left behind at the remains of a base belonging to the Diabolos cult, which was wiped out by a mysterious explosion. Hoping Sherry can decipher it, Iris is met with the young student's modest hesitation. Hearing this, her adoptive father leans forward with a reassuring smile, expressing total faith in her bright future. But when Sherry calls him vice principal, Ruslan playfully teases her to call him daddy instead. Refocusing on security, Iris promises to assign guards to protect the artifact, warning that the cult might try to retrieve it. Since they can't trust the Knights after Xenon's betrayal, Iris reveals her newly founded elite unit, the Crimson Knights. Glenn, her scarred vice captain, instantly salutes in agreement. Suddenly, Princess Alexia demands a spot on the guard detail to investigate her savior, Shadow. When Iris pulls the overprotective big sister card and denies her, Alexia unleashes the ultimate tactical blackmail by threatening to expose Iris's habit of sleeping with a giant bear plushie. She even ruthlessly exposes Iris's cat-patterned panties to the entire room. Horrified and completely defeated, Iris immediately folds, assigning Alexia to less dangerous tasks as the intense meeting comes to a quiet close. The next morning, the action shifts to the bustling commercial streets of Midgar, where Sid is busy pretending to be a background character. He treats this fantasy world exactly like a sandbox RPG, utilizing the ultimate gamer strategy of pretending to be a low-level mob to avoid aggro. Walking down the road, Hirogari asks if there are any romantic developments with the princess. Sid casually responds that they broke up, while Jaga waves his hand in complete disbelief. Sid maintains his stoic pace, explaining that she was more into smacking his internal organs. To cheer him up, Hyoro promises to take him to a nice place, while Jaga eagerly asks if it has raunchy stuff. Hyoro dismisses the vulgarity and points toward a massive, highly decorated stone building
A massive crowd of eager shoppers surrounds the entrance, which displays a polished sign for Mitsugoshi Trading. Hiyoro proudly boasts about a legendary sweet called chocolate, smugly posing as he explains how sweets will make ladies swarm them. Another student teases him for being single, causing Hiyoro to flail his arms defensively. Sid, meanwhile, is curious about what chocolate this world has to offer. Just then, a beautiful shop representative with long, wavy hair addresses the crowd, smiling as she warns that the wait time is up to 80 minutes. Hiyoro's jaw drops in absolute panic, and their shaved-head friend stresses that they might miss curfew. He nervously mentions rumors of a dangerous slasher roaming the capital, sparking Sid's mild intrigue. Down a dark, nearby alleyway, guardsmen discuss the slasher's heavy casualties, pointing to a fellow knight lying dead in fresh blood. Back on the street, Hiyoro arrogantly dismisses the danger, immediately trying an awkward pickup line on a passing lady. Ignoring him, Nu approaches Sid under the guise of a survey. While Hiyoro and Jaga beg to join, Nu politely shuts them down and leads Sid inside. Sid looks back at his friends, weeping over their defeat. Passing by rows of luxury products, Nu guides him through grand double doors and up a massive staircase as Sid marvels at the department store luxury. Walking down a quiet, private corridor, Sid asks where the survey is. Nu smiles and opens a pair of towering white doors, revealing a grand, chandelier-lit chamber filled with Shadow Garden operatives. Gamma gracefully steps forward to welcome her lord, causing Sid's eyes to widen in shock. Gamma, the hyper-intelligent third member of the Seven Shades, bows deeply, but immediately faceplants onto the floor in a clumsy disaster. Sid watches with a deadpan face, fully aware that she is physically the weakest. Gamma proudly presents the massive haul, making Sid sweat drop over how his childhood game grew this big. Striking a cool, masterfully calculated pose on a throne, Sid claims the view is decent and dramatically channels his magic. He unleashes a stunning vortex of purple mana, leaving the low-ranking members in absolute worship. Gamma sits dazed by the power, tears of pure devotion welling in her eyes. She remembers how he cured her possession in the cold snow, recalling the shadow wisdom he bestowed upon her. She remembers clutching her notebook in the forest as Sid casually told her to eat beans to gain muscle. Gamma used these random ideas to build a global commercial empire, leaving Sid internally screaming with broke boy jealousy. To keep up his cool persona, Sid asks about the company's influence, and Gamma proudly explains their massive branches. Sid stares back in salty silence, which Gamma misinterprets as cold disapproval. She drops to the floor in a desperate panic, promising to grow stronger, while Sid secretly laments how he was left out of his own ideas. Shifting back to business, Gamma asks if he visited because of that matter. Sid tilts his head, completely clueless, as an ominous silence fills the room. Gamma apologizes for not yet finding the black-clad slasher who claims to be from Shadow Garden. Sid sits up in genuine surprise, immediately suspecting his violent ex-girlfriend and recalling how she tried to chop him up. Feigning omniscience, Sid smirks and claims he has a hunch. Gamma gasps in sheer awe, admiring his unparalleled intellect before introducing Nu as their capable new recruit. Sid nods mysteriously, offering a final, lingering look as Nu bows politely. Shifting back to the elegant Mitsugoshi Trading main counter, Sid is busy working his ordinary mob guys to purchase cheap chocolates from Gamma, who gladly provides them for free. Outside, Jaga frantically runs to avoid getting locked out of the academy, while Hiyoro urges a leisurely Sid to hurry up. As the sun completely sinks below the horizon, Jaga inquisitively asks what took so long, and Sid claims the survey simply lasted that long. Jaga shrugs, asking if he got his chocolates. Suddenly, Sid hears the faint, sharp clashing of steel in a nearby alley. Hiyoro yells in confusion as Sid freezes, completely focused on the sound of a sword. Resolving to hunt down the fake Shadow Garden member, Sid dramatically tells his friends to go on without him.
He then clenches his fists, screaming that he has a life-or-death diarrhea emergency, which leaves Hyoro in absolute slack-jawed shock. Jaga begs him not to stay behind, but Sid insists that he must settle this battle alone. Hyoro asks if he's truly about to burst, while Jaga frantically questions if he's choosing dignity over curfew. Sid simply groans in mock agony and tells them to leave him, forcing Jaga and Hyoro to reluctantly run. Sprinting away in tears, Hyoro vows never to forget him, while Jaga yells that they'll be friends even if he ends up shitting in the streets. Crouching low, Sid yells for them to fly, leaving the cobblestone street dead silent. Darting into the shadows to trace the conflict, Sid's eyes widen as he spots Princess Alexia. He quickly hides, wondering what on earth went wrong in her life to make her the slasher. Further down the alley, Alexia confidently demands her opponent to give up, but a hooded figure mutters, "Shadow Garden." Sid watches in disbelief as more hooded cultists emerge to encircle the princess. Alexia demands to know why they are attacking innocents and what Shadow's true goals are. Hearing their clumsy performance, Sid's internal monologue absolutely dies of secondhand cringe at their incredibly low-budget knockoff routine. It's like watching a modern gamer witness a cheap mobile ad copy their favorite MMORPG. Alexia grips her sword as the tension peaks, and the imposters close in. Nervous, but trying to maintain a brave front, she is blindsided when the lead attacker lunges with blinding speed. The strike sends her reeling backward as blood spills from her lips, leaving our favorite wicked princess completely overwhelmed and at the mercy of some very bad actors. Yo, what is up, guys? Under the cover of pitch black darkness, a gang of sketchy, hooded copycats ambushes Princess Alexia in a classic narrow stone-paved alleyway trope. Suddenly, the lead attacker activates his speed hacks, lunging forward with blinding velocity to strike Alexia and send blood flying from her lips as she reels backward from the devastating blow. She collapses to her knees on the hard stone ground, clutching her HP bar and struggling to hold on to her sword. Looking up at the towering figure looming over her with a raised weapon, she drops her tough act, cowers in terror, and begs for her life. But wait, it's a total bait and switch. As the dummy lunges downward to finish her off, Alexia drops the damsel act and counters with a savage midair kick directly to his chest. Spitting blood, she taunts her attacker with premium gamer energy. Like I'd ever say that for real. Thank you for lunging straight at me, fool. She immediately follows through by swinging her sword in a decisive downward arc to slash the staggering loser, and raises her sword to bark at the rest of the mob. Well, who's next? While trying to patch up her bleeding side with spellcaster magic, another generic cultist lunges from the shadows. Her reflexes lag in complete shock as she screams, "No way! How can he still move?" Suddenly, the attacker's eyes bulge as a black blade impales him straight through the chest from behind. Standing behind him is our ultimate edgy role player, Shadow, who stands colder than dry ice. The remaining copycats freeze in a tense standoff. Shadow, posing in a dramatic silhouette with glowing eyes, drops his premium Chuunibyou voice line. "Foolish pretenders who claim the name of Shadow Garden, you shall pay for your sins with your lives." The cultists pale in sheer terror before Shadow lunges forward with explosive speed, slicing them into mincemeat. Having effortlessly cleared the lobby, he turns his back on the scene and mutters, "Fools." But Alexia isn't done. She brandishes her sword and demands, "Stop right there, Shadow! I'm Alexia Midgar, Princess of the Realm." Under his hood, his glowing eyes lock onto her with suffocating gravity. Alexia recoils with an irritated, fearful ugh. Despite her trembling, she demands answers. "I've been looking for you ever since that incident. Answer me before you leave. What are your goals?
To what ends do you wield that power? Standing completely detached in the cold wind, the mastermind warns her to back away, saying, "Do not get involved. The less you know, the less you suffer." The princess presses closer, shouting, "For the sake of my country, I must find out, whether you're a friend or—" Shadow turns his head slightly and drops a chilling, high-tier threat. "If I said I'm your enemy, what then?" Completely stunned, she stammers, I'd fight you. Maybe I can't match you now," and tearfully vows to protect her sister and friend. "But if Iris and my only friend will be in danger because of you, then I swear that I'll—" Shadow instantly vanishes into the night, leaving Alexia walking down the towering alleyway
while looking at her trembling hands, sobbing, "I can't stop shaking." She grips her sword, wondering who on earth he is. Gazing up at the glowing moon casting light over the rooftops, she whispers, "Are you?" As we transition to a hushed alleyway in another part of the starry city, walking calmly,
Shadow reflects on these fake Shadow Garden guys with a classic gamer mindset. Now, why would those guys dress up in all black and pretend to be Shadow Garden? I know the answer very well. As two winded copycats flee in the distance, Sid's inner monologue hits a peak of supreme cringe. They're a bunch of copycats who look up to us. They admire Shadow Garden, or rather, the notion of a shadow eminence. Smiling with immense satisfaction at his own legacy,
his face suddenly goes dead cold because nobody steals his brand. But I will not tolerate these fakers. To do so would be to throw away my identity as a shadow eminence. Because just as this guy here is a shadow eminence, he strikes a ridiculously dramatic pose. He declares, "I too am an eminence of shadows." Suddenly, his actual subordinate Nu steps out from the dark, gushing over him with an "Amazing work, Lord Shadow," as her heels clack on the cobblestones.
Posing like an absolute lord, he commands her, "Do not fail me." Nu bows deeply, offering her solemn vow to clean up the trash and gather intel. "Yes, my lord. You apprehended them with amazing swiftness. Please, leave the rest to me. I will find out what they know." Before leaving, Shadow executes a blindingly fast slash, disarming a hiding copycat who stumbles back in absolute shock. The attacker screams, "Ah, arg!" as his fingers are sliced off in a spray of crimson and clatter onto the floor. Nu gazes down with an icy, sadistic expression and tells him, "Know that I am nowhere near as kind as Lord Shadow." With a terrifying smile, she adds, "Do not expect a merciful death," before a sudden slash cuts through the alley, leaving only a dark splatter of blood across the stone walls. Next morning, at the prestigious Midgar Royal Spellsword Academy, the bustling cafeteria is packed with lively chatter, while Sid stands casually with his dorky, zero-riz sidekicks. Facing Sid, his energetic blonde buddy initiates a conversation by calling out, "Yo, Sid!" He leans in to tease Sid with a smug grin, saying, "Tough shit yesterday, huh? At least your dignity is still in one piece." Directly beside him, the buzzed hair friend joins the roast, commenting, "Your humanity was really in peril there." Sid, maintaining a completely deadpan poker face, responds in a flat tone, "Yeah, good thing you two were there to help." Suddenly, the blonde guy erupts with explosive, over-the-top hero pose energy, roaring, "The plan is in motion!" Holding up a small gift wrapped like a classic visual novel quest item, the buzzed-haired friend echoes the hype by screaming, "Operation Lady Killer with a present!" The blonde buddy quickly calms down, resting his chin on his hand with a confident, scheming smirk as he says, "But that's enough shit-talking." He points toward a table where a girl with long, wavy, reddish-brown hair is eating alone, declaring, "My target is right over there. She always eats alone, so I'm sure wooing her will be easy." Meanwhile, The buzzed hair guy points to a blonde student nearby, bragging, "And I will go for that girl. I've already researched everything there is to know." With a creepy, excited grin, he proudly raises a single finger to detail his invasive stalker background check, listing her social circles, room number, favorite food, body measurements, the color of her panties. The blonde buddy smiles brightly and turns to Sid to ask, "Oh, nice going. What about you, Sid?"
Sid, looking absolutely bored and holding a small chocolate box with a blank expression, mutters, "I'll just give it to some rando." The blonde friend immediately charges forward with cartoonish energy, leaving Sid behind, while yelling, "Well, there's no time to waste! Charge!" Running alongside him, the buzzed hair friend screams with confident, somewhat misplaced hope, "The next time we meet, we'll all have girlfriends!" A short while later, Sid is standing completely unfazed in the academy hallway, while a screaming crowd of annoyed students surrounds him, yelling, "Cha! It's him! The stalker! Hey, you lanky guy! What do you want from my fiancé?" Ignoring the mob, Sid keeps his calm composure while harboring a dark, menacing thought, silently vowing, "The next time we meet, you'll be rotting corpses." Returning to the cafeteria, Sid walks up to a table where a pink-haired girl named Sherry Barnett is sitting quietly with her drink. Leaning in, Sid initiates a direct conversation by asking, "Hey, yeah, you like sweet stuff?" Sid casually plops a wrapped box of chocolates onto her tray, offering, "Have some chocolate, whatever." Sherry stares at the gift in utter surprise, her face flushing red as she squeaks, "Eh?" Looking completely flustered and caught off guard, she clutches the box and stammers, "What?" She quickly turns to watch Sid calmly walk out of the cafeteria, wondering silently, Later that evening, Sherry is sitting alone at her cluttered desk in a quiet, dimly lit library, surrounded by ancient research materials. Holding up a piece of chocolate to examine it with deep curiosity, she thinks, what could this be? Her thoughts are interrupted as Vice Principal Ruslan Barnett stands in the doorway with a warm, inquisitive smile, asking, "Oh, Sherry, where did you get that chocolate?" Startled, Sherry straightens her posture, stammering, "Vice Principal Ruslan? Father?" Embarrassed, she soft explains, "This was given to me by a boy. I don't know." Ruslan chuckles with an amused expression, noting, "Oh, so it was a present." Sherry looks down in genuine confusion, questioning, "A present? But why?" Ruslan walks closer with a gentle, fatherly smile, suggesting he must have fallen in love with you at first sight. As her cheeks flush, he details the extreme rarity of the treat, telling her that's the kind of chocolate that would be hard to attain even if you got in line first in the morning. He must have gone through a lot to buy that for you. Ruslan maintains his supportive tone, advising, make sure to think about how you answer him. Relationships are also part of what you learn as a student. He reaches for a teapot to pour hot tea, adding, of course, research is important as well. Holding his warm cup, he asks about her academic work. Are you making progress with the artifact? Sherry answers her father diligently, explaining, yes, the knights are watching over it in the other room right now. Clutching her cup, her eyes soften with a melancholic look of grief, sharing, so far, all I've learned is that it's a code used by an ancient civilization or organization. My mother, Kreia, was researching something similar before her death. She looks down with a wistful sigh, whispering, I just hope I can decipher it in her stead. Ruslan smiles warmly to encourage her, saying, with your smarts, I'm sure you can. After all, you even have a chance to study abroad in the Science City, Regawis. But suddenly, Ruslan doubles over in a violent, harsh coughing fit, dropping his cup while Sherry shrieks in terror. Father? He presses his hand to his mouth,
forcing a weak smile as he wheezes. I'm fine, although lately my condition hasn't been the best. Sherry's eyes widen with solemn resolve, declaring, Father, I just can't go abroad to study. Clutching her chest in deep devotion, she explains, I can't leave you behind when you're so sickly. I haven't even done anything to repay you for adopting me after my mother's death. Rusalyn's gaze softens with warm affection, replying, Sherry, I'm already happy knowing that I have such an amazing daughter. He stands tall and urges her to prioritize her own path, insisting, You must think of your own future first and foremost. Pointing to the chocolate, he gives his final instruction, adding, And make sure to try that chocolate. Sherry hesitates briefly before taking a soft, quiet bite of the sweet treat. She stands entirely alone in the quiet, book-lined library, letting a gentle, content smile spread across her face as a single tear escapes her eye. The next afternoon, the bright sun shines over the grand estate of the Midgar Spellsword Academy as Sid walks alone through the school courtyard, feeling slightly downtrodden. He grumbles about his friends being hospitalized, but a soft voice suddenly interrupts his thoughts, calling out, Excuse me. Startled, he turns his head, immediately recognizing the speaker as new, disguised in a remarkably plain uniform with round glasses and fluffy pom-poms. Sid turns fully to her in confusion, asking, New? Right? What's with that getup? New offers a polite, demure smile, explaining that it's a secret disguise to avoid suspicion. It's a disguise. I shouldn't be suspicious here in this uniform. Leaning in with a playful warning, she whispers, This is a secret from Lady Gamma. If she knew that I'm infiltrating the school during daytime, she'd be very angry. Sid notes her completely different vibe as they walk, saying, Sure, you do give off a different vibe, though. New smiles confidently, explaining she refined her makeup skills in her past life. It's sort of a skill from my past life. I'm good at applying makeup. At the company, I'm trying to look more mature. Sid curiously asks about her actual age, prompting her playful, mysterious reply, That's a secret. Looking at the grand buildings, she mentions her noble past as a student here. I used to be the daughter of a marquis, so I had my Sid curiously asks about her actual age, prompting her playful, mysterious reply. That's a secret. Looking at the grand buildings, she mentions her noble past as a student here. I used to be the daughter of a marquis, so I had my fair share of high society mingling. I even used to be a student here. Her expression shifts to quiet sadness as she recalls being cast aside due to her possession, until I was cast away for being possessed, as if I never even existed to begin with. But the sadness fades, and she turns warmly to him, stating she's much happier now. I came all the way to this campus to reminisce about old times, but I suppose I'm much happier now. Gazing affectionately at him, she feels profound gratitude, declaring, Yes, I have companions now who share the same ambitions, with my respected and beloved lord right beside me. Her face grows serious as she delivers her formal report, saying, Now, as for the people I interrogated, I wasn't able to get much information out of them. She explains their minds were broken due to powerful brainwashing, to which Sid grunts a vague, vacant, New continues, I believe they were part of the Diabolos cult's third children. In her mind, she reviews the tragic lore of the brainwashed orphans used as sacrificial pawns by the cult, but decides there's no need to explain such basic knowledge to her master, thinking, but such basic knowledge is not something I would need to explain to him. Walking along, she reasons that the enemies are claiming to be Shadow Garden to lure them out, while hinting at a stronger threat in the capital. Sid walks on with a non-committal. New mentions the recent confirmation of a powerful first child, Rex the Riveting Rebel. She reviews his terrifying elite martial prowess, once again keeping her observations silent since she assumes her master is already fully aware. But such basic information is something he'd obviously know by now. Speaking in a chillingly flat tone, she describes her ruthless execution of yesterday's captured intruders. As for the fools from yesterday, I hung them in the city. She stands partially shrouded in shadows, stating it should serve as a warning.
Warning that the cult is definitely plotting something. She bows respectfully, promising, I'm certain you're already well aware of many details, but I shall report anything new I find. Sid walks on looking completely blank, while the narrator dryly points out he is certainly not aware of anything. Meanwhile, inside a quiet, dimly lit royal bedroom, Princess Iris Midgar stands watchfully at the bedside of her younger sister, Princess Alexia, crossing her arms in stern thought. Iris ponders the slashers, saying, I see. So the slashers didn't belong to Shadow Garden. They were just pretending to. Propped up in bed, Alexia responds, That's what Shadow said. Iris sighs in frustration at their lack of intelligence on the mysterious group, admitting they know nothing. She recalls her fleeting memory of encountering Alpha during the crisis, thinking, during the incident, I came across a spell sword called Alpha. Remembering how the mysterious elf girl effortlessly neutralized the threat, she adds, she dealt with the monster in just one strike. That one must have been from Shadow Garden as well. Sitting beside the bed, Iris shares the concerning reports, saying, other reports also indicate that their organization is extremely powerful. But that's all we know. Alexia proposes a potential lead. Shadow was fighting against the Diabolus cult. Perhaps they would have some clues? Iris reaches for the medicine bottles as she resolves to act. Yes, they're certainly not just a simple religious group. I will look into them. She boasts about the Crimson Knights, saying, thankfully, the Crimson Knights have as many as 8 very capable members. Alexia retorts with a deadpan, unimpressed look. You mean only 8? Desperate to warn her sister, Alexia sits up quickly and clutches her sheets, asking, Iris, which one is the Crimson Knight's enemy? Is it the Diabolos cult or Shadow Garden? Her voice rises to a frantic, terrified shout as she recalls the blood-red sky. We cannot fight Shadow. You saw the explosion that painted the night sky red with blood? But Iris dismisses the warning with absolute composure, saying, we already agreed that it was the artifact going out of control. No human is capable of releasing such power. Alexia gasps in helpless, pained frustration. That's not... Iris coldly brushes off her claims as confusion from captivity, saying, I'm sure your memories are just hazy, because you'd been locked up for days by that point. Placing a toy bear next to her sister to urge her to rest, Alexia grumbles. I don't need this bear plushie, though. Iris pauses and turns her back, declaring with commanding authority, about the Crimson Knight's enemy, it's both. Anyone who threatens to bring harm to this country will not be allowed to roam free. Far away at the academy, Sherry Barnett rests her head tiredly against her arms at her desk, resolving to stay strong by her window, beside a mysterious dark-haired woman, while declaring, no matter what goes down in the future. Meanwhile, Sid Kagano swirls a wine glass in his dimly lit room with peak theatrical intensity, gazing out over the moonlit rooftops to finish his dramatic monologue with a flourish. No matter what conspiracy looms above our heads. We kick off right in the middle of the school's premier PvP tournament, where the stadium is absolutely buzzing with peak hype. Up on the VIP stage, the student council president and certified try-hard princess, Rose Oriana, is giving her grand opening speech, telling everyone to play nice and try not to get themselves hospitalized. Down on the dirt, our boy Sid is already mentally roasting her for putting on such a masterclass in textbook heroine behavior,
completely unfazed by the announcer suddenly screaming his and Rose's match pairings over the speakers. See, this biennial tournament is a massive deal for local spell swords, and the crowd is already aggressively backing Rose to absolutely demolish Sid. Sid, ever the connoisseur of generic background character tropes, sizes her up as the ultimate Oriana Kingdom import, whose sheer visual appeal turns any frame into a literal cinematic masterpiece. He knows she is basically the high-tier boss, second only to Princess Iris, a total main character archetype. Now, any rational, low-spec mob player would just forfeit to avoid getting put in a highlight reel, but Sid's brain is wired differently. He realizes this is the holy grail of background character design, the legendary first-round jobber who gets instantly deleted by the boss. He starts shaking with pure, unadulterated gamer adrenaline. Rose, bless her heart, thinks the poor guy is having a literal panic attack and kindly asks if he's nervous, prompting a flustered Sid to stammer out a lame agreement. She raises her rapier into a flawless combat stance, telling him to just relax and have a fair fight. While the spectators are collectively whispering, "Who invited my man?" about Sid, our protagonist couldn't be happier with the Zero Cheer fan club, immediately prepping his top-tier 48 forms of mob foo. His plan? Wait for the exact frame of her strike, jump and form a perfect L shape in midair at a crisp 60 kilometers per hour. This is a strategy he perfected in his previous life. After failing countless online fighting games due to bad hitboxes, now he's optimized the art of looking like a complete laggy loser. He's going to pop the hidden blood bags he taped to his uniform to paint the arena in a spectacular dark red mist. He wants maximum theatrical blood splatter, spinning majestically in an elegant fashion. To spurt it in a dramatic circle, he leaps into the air and screams, "Mob Foo Ultimate Form!" spinning violently to release his tailspin parry bloody tornado. He bites his own hand to trigger the next phase, crashing back onto the dusty floor and spraying a massive geyser of blood with his blood splitter Malerian technique. Rose is utterly traumatized by this horror show, but Sid is just chilling in his self-made bloodbath, grinning like a maniac while boasting he's got 46 more styles of jobbing left in him. The try-hard princess is completely frozen in shock, while the entire stadium is vibrating with absolute panic from their brief but violent clash. She is baffled how this level 1 mob is still standing after taking what she thinks are lethal hits, while the spiky-haired side characters and the pink-haired research girl Sherry watch in pure terror. Rose assumes his body must have hit its absolute limit, but the crowd is completely buying into the classic indomitable human spirit anime trope. She begs him to stop, but Sid just gives her a bloody edgelord smirk, making the spectator swoon at his sheer grit. Rose stares at him, convinced she's looking at someone who can't afford to lose, no matter what. Respecting his supposed legendary resolve, she decides to activate her ultimate skill to meet him with respect and focus, charging forward like a lightning bolt. But before she can slice him, a referee wearing a black cap cock-blocks the entire dramatic climax, calling the match off because Sid is literally painting the floor red. Sid protests that he can still fight, wanting to show off his 33 remaining moves, but the crowd and referee scream for him to get to the medical tent. He whines like a toddler whose speedrun got ruined, screaming in internal agony as his masterpiece is cut short. Meanwhile, Rose watches him get dragged away, convinced she just witnessed a true warrior whose eyes were lit with pure passion, who may have lost the match, but won the ultimate battle of the soul. Cut to a quiet school hallway under a fancy chandelier, where Sid, looking like an extra from a slasher film, is busy clutching his head. He's internally celebrating escaping the school doctors before they realized he didn't actually take a single point of damage, leaving a cartoonish trail of wet blood splatters behind him. Suddenly, Sherry intercepts him, looking utterly horrified at his ruined uniform. Sid's internal monologue is just dial-up internet noises trying to remember her name.
but Sherry is practically sparkling, telling him how cool he was for standing back up. Sid plays it cool, pretending his legendary healing factor just kicked in, which only makes Sherry even more amazed. He is physically repulsed by her terrible taste in what constitutes cool, which she confirms with absolute cheerful enthusiasm. Sid immediately labels her as a fellow mob character with a severely warped radar. Then she hits him with the classic romance sim event. She hands him some homemade cookies and asks if they can be friends. He accepts the free loot, which makes her face light up with a radiant, sparkling smile. Sherry immediately calls over her dad, and Sid is surprised by the sudden guest, who turns out to be none other than Vice Principal Ruslan, a retired high-tier lobby champion and former God of War victor. Sid's brain instantly registers the massive danger of associating with high-status NPCs, but he puts on his best pathetic mob voice when Ruslan asks about his health. Sid claims that Rose held back, and the boomer boss thanks Sid for being Sherry's first actual friend. Sherry dies of embarrassment, but Ruslan just laughs wholesome boomer laughs about the past, wishing them the best before walking off. As the old man leaves, Sid is internally screaming that he is strictly a solo queue player who doesn't want any of this main story questline drama. He declines Sherry's offer to go to the clinic with some peak Chuunibyou dialogue about spell swords not dying, pivoting to a tea date instead, which makes her swoon even harder at his raw, albeit bleeding, charisma. Shortly after, Sherry is looking out the window, having a full-on shoujo protagonist awakening because this mysterious chocolate-giving boy has stolen her heart. Meanwhile, Sid is just standing there with an unreadable, brooding expression, totally ignoring her vibe. We then transition to a scenic courtyard table where a cup of freshly brewed coffee sits steaming, and Sherry is having a coffee date with Princess Alexia. Alexia thinks they're talking about her artifact research quest project, but Sherry is there for some juicy relationship gossip. The poor research girl can't even handle black coffee, so Alexia tells her to add milk and sugar. Sherry dumps an ungodly amount of milk and sugar into her cup like an absolute chaotic gremlin before stuffing her face with snacks. When Alexia mentions how hard it is to get Mitsugoshi stock, Sherry's eyes spark with excitement as she boasts about how good they taste, having received them as a present. She blushes, dropping Sid's name as the gift giver, making her cheeks flush with warmth. Alexia nearly chokes on her tea, her toxic ex-girlfriend sensors immediately firing off at the mention of her former pooch. Sherry, totally oblivious to the red flags, happily boasts about becoming friends with him, before asking if the rumors about them dating were true. Alexia deadpans that they were just clout-chasing co-conspirators, which fills Sherry with enough romantic hope to practically power the entire kingdom. She's so hyped, she thanks Alexia and vows to speedrun her artifact research right before a loud, window-shattering noise interrupts their peaceful tea party. The next day, we're trapped in a cramped, stuffy lecture hall where the student collective is aggressively complaining about being held hostage after hours, with Sid sitting quietly in his uniform. They ask why they can't go home until Sid's background buddies, Jaga and Hyoro, explain that they're stuck waiting for some boring student council election speeches. Hyoro groans in sheer boredom. Right on cue, Rose Oriana glides in like she's walking a red carpet, taking the podium to address the captive audience. Sid is in the back doing a lazy golf clap, fully convinced he has successfully wiped his threat meter and that she won't even remember him. Rose stands tall at the podium, flashing a gorgeous, sweet smile at the crowd, prompting a delusional blonde classmate next to Sid to assume she is desperately thirsting for him.
Sid just hits him with the most NPC tier, "Ain't that the truth?" response. The classmate continues his delusional musings, prompting another monotone response from Sid. The guy spirals into his main character delusion, earning one final mechanic reaction from Sid. But then Sid's danger radar spikes, making his classmate ask what's wrong. Rose keeps her gaze fixed right on their section,
shutting down any delusional hopes. Under the desk, Sid tries to channel his mana, only to realize he's been hit with a massive area of effect magic silence debuff while his classmate keeps pestering him. Before he can even formulate a strategy to escape, his survival instincts warn him that a threat is arriving. The front wall of the lecture hall literally detonates into a million splinters. The room descends into absolute panic, with side characters screaming bloody murder as heavy combat boots step through the smoke. Terrified schoolgirls are crying for help, while a girl with glasses shrieks in disbelief. All while Sid watches a bunch of edgy, cloaked terrorists brandish their swords. The lead terrorist proudly announces that they are Shadow Garden, and that the academy is officially under new management. Now, any sane student would be praying for their life, but Sid's face lights up with the absolute purest joy imaginable. While Rose is desperately trying to protect her classmates in shock, Sid is internally celebrating because he's ultimate wet dream cliché, the classic school hostage situation, is finally happening, setting the stage for a glorious siege.
Inside a high-stakes classroom at the Midgar Royal Spellsword Academy, the chill vibes are instantly ruined when a generic cloaked terrorist barks at everyone to drop their weapons or die. While the NPC students immediately fold, our boy Sid Kaganu is having the absolute time of his life, instantly realizing their magic is blocked and that this is a school-wide hostage scenario. Seriously, he is physically shaking with pure, unadulterated hype over the endless potential of a classic terrorist arc attack. Striking a full-blown Chuunibyou pose to hide his manic grin, he labels these guys as Shadow Garden posers, loving how beautifully gritty their underworld roleplay is, and frantically plots how to make his ultimate mob debut. Meanwhile, the local high-spec princess and student council president, Rose Oriana, draws her rapier to claim the invaders don't know who they are messing with, calling their takeover the ambition of absolute madmen. The terrorist thug tells her to drop the steel, but Rose refuses to stand down silently, prompting the angry mob to swing a lethal strike to make her an example. Suddenly, her magic bar completely bottoms out, leaving her totally defenseless as the thug gloats that she is way too late, and swings a fatal slash that makes her brace for the sweet release of death. This is where Sid's ultimate gamer brain panics, because his perfect script is about to get ruined. Screaming that she's not supposed to get offed by nameless mobs, he vaults over the desks to protect the plot, knowing that dying in situations like this has always been the designated job of a background character. He takes the massive blade directly to the chest, sending blood flying everywhere as he crashes to the floor, leaving the entire classroom in a stunned, silent stupor. Rose immediately gets hit by a wave of massive nostalgia, recognizing his voice as the legendary battered underdog who never backs down, falling to her knees in despair as she realizes her hands are covered in his fresh blood. The mob classmates immediately lose it, with Hyoro screaming that this can't be real, Jaga wailing in pure denial, and a random female student bursting into tears, while Rose completely loses her mind in horror and trembles in absolute despair. Staring at Sid's motionless body lying in a literal swimming pool of dark red syrup, Rose shrieks his name in absolute agony, cradling him in her lap while demanding to know why he sacrificed himself for her. Sid, being the absolute theater kid he is, coughs up some dramatic blood, while Rose panics about her sealed healing spells, begging him to survive. Right on cue, Sid whispers a tragic, dying smile before letting his head loll to the side as he dies. As Rose stares at his serene, motionless face, she realizes his heart has completely stopped beating, weeping tears of immense guilt, while suddenly convincing herself that this random background mob had a deep, burning passion for her. Linking his quiet strength during the tournament to this ultimate act of devotion. She believes his ultimate act of sacrifice was motivated by a love more genuine than any of her fake highborn suitors, holding his cold hand and whispering a tearful, heartbroken goodbye. Right on cue, the head terrorist violently pokes her with his blade to ask if she's done rebelling.
Ordering the entire collective of students to march to the Great Hall or get turned into corpses, forcing his weeping friends to look back in horror as they are marched away. Left behind in the vast, silent hall of the academy, the dramatic sequence shifts as the students march away while Rose desperately whimpers Sid's name in her head. Shafts of pale light illuminate the empty, vaulted space where our protagonist is currently lying in his own blood, detachedly observing his own corpse with his left hand completely still.
Suddenly, his fingers give a sharp, spasmodic twitch, and he issues a mental command to move as his hand clutches his chest. He repeats the order to move and move again, furrowing his brow in absolute concentration before screaming "Move" in his head to execute a manual jumpstart of his stalled heart with a concentrated pulse of magic. Instantly, air rushes back into his lungs as he sits up coughing violently, clutching his chest to complain about how much that actually hurt, while casually admitting he let himself get cut for real just to make the performance look incredibly authentic. Grinning like an absolute madman, he celebrates the massive success of his high-risk play, explaining that he used his legendary heartbreak technique to stop his heart without permanent brain damage, striking a ridiculous dramatic pose to declare his ultimate form of mob foo. 10 minutes of being near death. Heartbreak mob. Getting back on his feet, he tests his magic bar, realizing he can still manipulate tiny, high-density particles of mana to heal his wounds, standing entirely alone in the massive, quiet hall. After a quick, dramatic shoe scuff, he decides it is finally time for his main act, unleashing a massive vortex of dark energy that weaves his iconic black cloak and blade as he prepares to hunt down the invaders as the ultimate edgelord, Shadow.
Deep inside the Academy's quiet library, high arched windows cast a serene but fragile light over the empty study desks. The local defensive units are on high alert, and Glenn, the scarred vice captain of the Crimson Knights, nervously grips his sword hilt to ask, "What's going on out there?" His junior partner Marco anxiously responds, "It seems we're under attack. They're spread all over the campus."
Immediately guessing the enemy's strategy, "Do you think they're after the artifact?" Glenn, assessing their magic-sealed handicap, cautions, we need to move carefully now that we can't use magic, before casting a worried glance toward their VIP scholar. Could be. This is the worst time to disturb her concentration. Meanwhile, entirely oblivious to the impending raid, Sherry Barnett remains hyper-focused on the Eye of Avarice artifact floating in front of her, scribbling notes like a madwoman.
Suddenly, she halts mid-stroke with a gasp. Could it be? Oh my. Sweating bullets at this game-changing realization, she frantically mutters, "Quickly, I need to decipher this as fast as I can." Her hands blurring as she writes down ancient code. Her bodyguards stand guard like silent sentinels, while she desperately rushes to finish. Just a little more, and I'll see the truth this artifact is pointing towards. But the piece is violently shattered as a massive arched window is blown inward in a shower of glass. Sherry gasps in shock as a smug, hooded invader leaps through the wreckage. The edgelord wannabe attempts a dramatic entry, claiming, "We are Shadow Garden," prompting a confused "What's this?" from Marco. But the invader instantly breaks character, pulling down his mask to laugh. Or, was it Shadow Guardian? Who gives a shit? And introducing himself. "I'm the great Rex, Rex the riveting rebel." Sherry drops to the floor, letting out a terrified,
He, Marco demands. Shadow Garden? I've heard the rumors. What are your goals? Do you think you can get away with an attack on this academy? But Rex is just an arrogant troll. Yeah, I'm sure Shadow Garden will have a hard time after this. As for our goals, no idea. I can't remember shit. When Marco yells, "You! Do you think this is a game?"
Rex drops the smug act for a cold stare, pointing lazily at Sherry. My job is to collect the artifact. He stretches his neck, bragging that he was promised he could go wild before leaning in with a psycho glare. So let's talk, bitches. Where's the damn artifact? Under his overwhelming high-level mini-boss pressure, Glenn bravely shields Sherry, claiming, "We know nothing." Rex pulls a sarcastic, "For reals?"
Shoot. Guess I'll try somewhere else. And then instantly whips back around with dark magical tendrils. Not. You look like you know exactly what I need. As Sherry cowers on the floor, Rex raises his blade with sadistic bloodlust, screaming, "All right, who wants to die first?" As he leaps forward to slash down at her. Maybe the little missy here. She screams in panic, shielding her head. No! Suddenly, Glenn throws himself in the way, his sword clashing violently against Rex's blade in a shower of sparks.
Rex grins, enjoying the resistance, but Glenn stands firm, lecturing, magic is not everything. With enough difference in skill, parrying such a strike is easy, Sherry mutters in confusion. Difference in skill? This absolutely triggers Rex's ego, who snarls, "Hold on, motherfucker. You actually think you're stronger than me?" Glenn answers with a stone cold, "Of course," sending Rex into a mocking laugh as he demands, "Okay, I like your guts. You can tell me your name." Glenn grips his hilt, announcing his name. Glenn, and proudly charges alongside Marco. "Vice Captain of the Crimson Knights, Glenn the Bearded Lion. And with me is Marco." Marco yells back, "Run away, quickly!" And Sherry, whimpering, snatches the artifact and bolts down the school corridor. She runs in blind panic, covering her ears to block the terrifying noises, until a stray sword flies through the air and slices the wall right beside her. A grim reminder of how close death truly is. Meanwhile, right outside the academy, the camera cuts to the exterior modern stone walls against a bright sky. High above the chaos, a dark silhouette stands perched on the very edge of the tiled roof, his long black coat whipping dramatically in the high-altitude wind. He shifts his stance, crossing his arms to maximize his edgelord presence, his eyes glowing with calculating intensity under his hood. Deeply satisfied with his peak theatrical timing, he ticks off his mental roleplay checklist. To-do list item completed. Look down upon the masses from the rooftop. Looking down, he tracks the movement of the hostages, notices the local authorities idling helplessly outside the magic seal zone, and spots the few terrorists patrolling the empty corridors. He starts scheming his next play, wondering, I have a good grasp of the situation. Now, how do I have the most fun here? Should I wait until night? Looking up at the bright sun, he complains about the lack of nighttime aesthetics. After all, this black coat looks best at night. During the day, under the blue sky and this bright sun, no, arriving now in this black getup would be lame. He strikes a sharp pose, thoroughly displeased with the invaders' lack of stage presence. These idiots don't get this at all. They have no eye for aesthetics. A wave of genuine frustration washes over him, prompting him to mutter, "Pick your clothes for the occasion, damn it!" He relates their terrible style to the ultimate crime of stuffing your face with curry udon wearing a white tux, or attending a fancy ball while shoving curry udon down your throat. But he can't let these amateurs ruin the Shadow Garden brand. So with a predatory grin, he decides, "Yep,
Let's waste these fools. Raising his finger, he aims his magical threads at the unsuspecting targets below, chuckling, "You walked into my kill zone, suckers." With a casual flick, he instantly slices 2 guards in half, blowing on his fingers like a total dork. Booyah! Double kill! As he sweeps the area for his next target, his jaw drops when he sees Sherry running across the path, instantly realizing she didn't actually lose her tail as a pack of hooded figures scream, "We'll get you," while sprinting after her. Shadow spots the ancient relic in her hands and deduces there is more to this than a simple chase. Instantly, his inner gamer realizes this is a main story questline where the Shadow Eminence is supposed to make a clutch, theatrical rescue. This must be part of the main plot, and as it reaches its climax, the Shadow Eminence makes his dashing yet covert entrance. Sounds dope. Excitedly cracking the roof tiles under his boot, he dives headfirst into the sky, his cape billowing like a wingsuit, as he celebrates, "Another to-do list item completed. I cleared 2 things from my list." A graceful dive off a roof.
The video ends here, but the story isn't over yet. Like the video if you're ready for the next part.